Hello, everyone. We're starting a new chapter this week, the Biological Perspective, Chapter 2. And we touched on it a little bit last week, but we're going to go into great detail on it this week. The Biological Perspective is Chapter 2 because it's such a pervasive perspective. It's something that's so important, and you really can't deny the role of biology. Environment is also important, but biology is one of the more predictable things. A person's environment is a bit more cloudy. So with the biological perspective, the great thing is we already know a lot about the biologies of our body. So it tends to be a bit more of a simple chapter to go through. There will be lots of terms and vocabulary that will be hard to get and to remember, but we're going to try the best we can. So, first, with Module 4, the nervous system, we're going to look at Lesson Objective 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3, and I promise I'll try and go as fast as I can. 4.4, 4.5, and 4.6 are hormones. We will get to it in another video. So, the nervous system. It's an extensive network of specialized brain cells that carries information to and from all parts of the body, mostly from the brain to every other part of the body. This is a diagram. You might want to pause here because this is a really important way to organize and remember a bunch of different information, because I'm gonna hit you with a lot of information. So please go ahead and pause and really read this and really understand this, because it's going to make everything else easier. Go ahead. I'll give you time. Alright, you ready? You got it now? Alright, let's get to it. Okay, so neurons. These are the basic cells. We also call nerve cells or brain cells. And these are essentially the building blocks or the bricks of the nervous system. We really can't have a nervous system without neurons. So, for example, we have muscles are made of muscle cells, and skin is made of skin cells. Well, brain cells and nerve cells are made from neurons. Very important. I'm not going to go into great detail about this, but I will say I want you to know the parts of a neuron: the dendrites, the soma, the axon, and the myelin sheath. So feel free to pause in these parts and really get to know them. Myelin sheath actually very, very important, particularly in the health and the speed of neurons. So these are the parts of the neuron, and I'm going to definitely ask you to know each of these parts. And we'll go into more detail in class, but I want you to know one very important thing. The dendrites, this is where messages come in from other neurons, and it goes into the cell body and gets shot all the way across the axon through the myelin sheath to the axon and out the axon terminal or synaptic knob, because they kind of look like doorknobs. So please know that messages start here, they exit here. Always. Always, always, always. Please remember that. Now, a neuron can exist in two states. Either a resting potential, which just essentially means it's doing nothing, it's just at rest, and action potential. So this is when the ions and the chemicals, the potassium and the sodium, are just right and allows for the neuron to fire a message. And again, it's an electrochemical message, so it's electrical in nature, but it's also chemical because it utilizes, again, ions, and specifically ions of sodium and potassium. And it requires just the right balance of potassium and sodium, as well as a change in chemical charge. I'll show you what I mean in just a second here. So as you can see, when it's at rest, there's a outside positive charge, and inside there's a negative charge, and you can see that here also. But that flips and changes as it goes, causing it to fire. Now, the details of this I don't expect you to really understand, but I may make this particular slide an extra credit. So you might want to pause and study this next time you're studying for this test. So, axon terminals, very important. So this at the very ends of the axon terminals, and again, terminal means end, so that should be your indication of where the message goes. It ends at the terminal. Terminal means end. In the synaptic knob, this is where all the happy stuff happens, in the synaptic vesicles. And out of these vesicles come neurotransmitters. And these are ones that really are the star players in terms of communicating between neurons. Let me show you. Two very important ones. The synaptic gap is the gap between neurons, and the receptor sites. Receptor sites are sort of like gateways or doors that let chemicals or ions in and out of the neuron. So here's what the synapse looks like. So again, this is the synaptic knob right here. It looks kind of like a doorknob. And this is the axon, so the nerve impulse, the electrical mesh is coming in here. Depending on the nature of the impulse, it determines what neurotransmitters are being let out. So inside these vesicles are collections of neurotransmitters that are just waiting to be released depending on what the message is. And so it attaches to the membrane wall and lets the neurotransmitters out. What's really cool is that there are already ions of potassium and sodium already hanging out. So it's these little red things, those are the ions of the potassium and sodium. And what the neurotransmitters do is they lock onto the receptor sites, again, the doorways, the gateways, and they either open up or close these doors, letting in or out ions that go in here. Now once these ions get in here, boom, it can start another action potential, or it can turn off and set this neuron from active to passive into resting potential state. These are examples of neurotransmitters. You can feel free to pause at this point. I'm not going to overly explain them because all the information is here, but I will say that serotonin and dopamine are very important ones. And when we study psychological disorders or mental disorders, the level or lack thereof of serotonin and dopamine can play a large role in mental disorders. And also medication can target these neurotransmitters and to restore balance in the synaptic gap. So very important to know for later chapters. Now, the central nervous system, very easy, contains the spinal cord, which is along your spine and goes up and down your back, and is important for many different reflexes and also life-saving tasks. Also, your brain is there. Now, one of the things it does is it's responsible for a reflex. So, for example, when you touch something that's hot, it sends a message to the brain responds, sends it to here and back to the muscle, and it makes your muscle go back away from the danger. That is a reflex. Three important types of neurons to know in this particular type of reflex are the sensory neurons, the motor neurons, and the interneurons. Now, the sensory neuron, they sense things. So we have sensory neurons in our skin, in our eyes, in our nose, tongue, you name it. Any of our five senses. And a motor neuron makes us move. So motor makes a car move. Motor neurons make our muscles move. And the interneurons communicate between the sensory neurons and the motor neurons. So again, in this example, this little guy right here is the interneuron, communicating between the sensory neuron and the motor neuron. And now, this may seem like a very long line, but trust me, this is actually how long a neuron cell can be. So for example, this is the cell body with the nucleus, this is the cell body with the nucleus, this is the cell body with the nucleus, and these are the dendrites. And again, to stress, you can have a neuron in your body that's this long. I'm not kidding. This is not just an example. It's a real life size thing, except this is not the size. This is below a little bit. Okay, peripheral nervous system, guys. I'm trying to wrap this up and try and get this done as quickly as we can. So, the peripheral nervous system means just outside. So it's not central. It's not the brain. It's not the spinal cord. It's just outside the center. And there's two parts of the peripheral nervous system: the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. So, as you can see from this diagram, this is the spine, the spinal cord, which goes to the brain, central nervous system. CNS. Everything else, PNS, peripheral nervous system. Now, to help you remember the difference between the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system, soma means body, and when you think of this, body control. So that's exactly what it does. The CNS to the voluntary muscles of the body. Voluntary, that means you can control, you can volunteer. So the somatic nervous system controls anything that you can control. So snapping your fingers, whistling, and eating, walking, jumping, anything that you can control at any moment of the time is controlled by the somatic nervous system. Now the autonomic system, auto means it does by itself. So an automobile, or a car, auto means it can do itself. Or automatic, it does it on its own. And so I want you to remember that. It controls all of the involuntary muscles, organs and glands. So automatically, this nervous system controls your stomach, controls your heart. So for example, I can't control how fast my heart beats. I can't tell my heart to just stop beating at any moment in time. And it's a good thing too, because a lot of these systems regulate our survival. Tell us when we're hungry, tell us when we're thirsty, tell us when to sleep. These are things that are out of our control and for good reason. Otherwise, if they were in our control, we might accidentally kill ourselves. Now, sympathetic division. There's a sympathetic and parasympathetic division to the autonomic system. Very important because of the fight or flight system. So whenever there's a stressful thing in our environment, the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system mobilizes or gets ready our bodies to prepare or defend off threats to our survival. And so whenever you take a test and you get test anxiety, it's because the sympathetic division is firing up, getting you fired up and getting you ready to fight or run away, flight, from a particular threat. And the parasympathetic division, after you've dealt with the stress, it relaxes your body. It brings you back to normal. And we can talk about more of this in class. Before we get out of here, I do want to share with you a couple other videos that are going to be helpful, and I do want you to watch. If it'll pull up. Okay. So if you go to my YouTube page, you'll see that there's the psychology playlist. What I want you to do is I want you to scroll down. Please watch videos number 8 and 9. What is a neuron and what is a synapse? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Watch this video and those two videos, and you'll be prepared for Tuesday's class. Have a great night.